Episode 13, The Mushroom Kingdom awaits. Luigi stood at the gate of Toad Town, Cobalt beside him. For the first time in a long while, he felt perfectly rested. Dozens and dozens of trials and battles likely lay ahead of him, but despite his naturally cautious personality, Luigi tried to keep himself focused on the present. He had just freed Toad Town from Koopa control, given freedom to the peaceful and innocent people of the town he had spent most of his life in. It was early in the next morning after the party, and the sun had just risen, breaking through the clouds to shine upon the newly free town. Luigi could already hear the sounds of hammers and saws, working to remove all evidence of the Empire. They were doing their part. Now it was time for him to do his. Toadbert and Toadette were standing before them, saying goodbye. Luigi saw an emotional look in Cobalt's usually tough and confident face as Toadbert clapped him on the shoulder.
By boggity, Cobalt, you've made me proud,
the blue-capped Toad said, shaking his head sadly.
I always knew you were a fighter, but I never. Hey, no use shedding any tears now, Toadbert,
Cobalt replied, scratching his head in embarrassment.
Toad Town's free. Go enjoy yourself. Why? Yes, of course.
Toadbert nodded, glancing back at the pathway which ran through the town, slowly climbing a hill until it reached the castle.
I'm so glad that Bowser's minions kept the library mostly untouched. I don't know how many hours of sleep I've lost imagining some Goomba using
great mushrooms of the past as a fire starter.
You going to be okay here by yourself?
Luigi asked the Toads with concern. He didn't know what the Koopa's next move was going to be. While he was certain that most of Boom Boom's garrison had been captured, he couldn't rule out the possibility that one of them had escaped. For all he knew, there could be a fleet of airships en route to Toad Town before sundown.
Oh, Luigi!
Toadette sighed, shaking her head.
You're such a worrywart. We're the Toad Brigade. Trust us to hold down the fort while you're gone. We've already made plans for some defense systems,
Toadbert added.
It seems like the Koopas left quite a bit of bombs and bill blasters behind in the castle. I have a feeling we'll be able to put them to good use.
Whoa! Luigi exclaimed. The Toads were actually planning to defend the town instead of just run away and scream? They really were serious about this.
In that case, I have to be serious too,
Luigi thought to himself.
I've got to rush all the way to Bowser and give him some payback. Here's your jacket, Cobalt,
Toadbert said, handing the blue Yoshi a studded leather jacket. Cobalt grinned and put it on.
Thanks, Toadbert,
he replied.
I wouldn't leave town without this. We should get going,
Luigi remarked, shooting a glance at Peach's castle. The sun was shining brightly on it and he could see the tiny figures of Toads, hard at work on the roof to repair it. It was going to be odd, leaving the town he had spent 20 years in. This whole notion of traveling into the Mushroom Kingdom to take down Bowser felt almost as if it was transporting him to a bygone age.
Yeah, the Koopa Empire isn't going to fall on its own.
Cobalt nodded, giving Toadbert's hand a firm shake before turning away. The glasses-clad Toad looked near to tears.
We got your back, Luigi,
Toadette exclaimed cheerfully.
Go squish a Goomba for me, Kay.
Luigi nodded, giving the two Toads a thumbs up.
Don't worry, you guys,
he exclaimed, hoping he was really as confident as he sounded.
I'm going to save the Mushroom Kingdom. At least, I think. Don't be so hard on yourself,
Cobalt said, giving Luigi a teasing shove.
You're amazing. Seriously. Oh. Okay.
Luigi nodded, blushing from embarrassment. He wasn't used to getting this much praise. Was this how Mario felt, he wondered? A few minutes later, the two were off, traveling over the rolling hills of the Mushroom Plains. The sun was shining up above Luigi's head, warmly beating down upon his cap as the birds chirped merrily in the air. He could still smell the fresh scent of the dew on the bright green grass. Now, nearly a mile away from Toad Town, Luigi couldn't help looking back. At this distance, Toad Town looked no different than it had before Bowser's conquest, with the tallest tower of the castle rising above the mushroom-shaped toad houses like a flower in full bloom. It reminded Luigi of the fact that no matter how broken and overrun it was, the Mushroom Kingdom was still the Mushroom Kingdom. No amount of bob-ombs and bullet bills could change that.
You ever been out here?
Luigi asked Cobal as the two continued to walk through the plain, past the tall, colorful rocks which were plentiful in this part of the kingdom.
Or did you just stay in the town? I've been out a couple times,
Cobal replied.
Not too much, though. I've only been to Koopa Village to pick up some extra items when the shop was out.
Luigi nodded.
Hey, you've missed out on a lot of amazing places,
he said, thinking back to all of his exciting adventures with Mario.
You ever heard of Star Hill? Sparkling Waters? The Thwomp Ruins?
Cobal shook his head.
Nope, never heard of any of them,
he said regretfully as they continued their trek over the sprawling plains.
Pity, they sound like sweet places.
Luigi nodded.
Hey, well, you know. Maybe one day you'll be free to explore the kingdom at your own pace,
he said optimistically. He neglected to add the fact that he wasn't entirely sure how long it would take until that day would come. Although the Mario brothers had defeated Bowser more times than Luigi could count, they had never once tried to knock him off the throne of the Koopa Kingdom. Right now, they were up against a Bowser who had control of not just his own kingdom, but the entire planet, and who would have had 20 years and near infinite resources to improve his army and defenses. Was this the kind of thing that would take a full-on war to finish? That certainly wasn't his comfort zone. Leave that kind of stuff to the Koopas, all he was good for was stomping minions and sucking up ghosts. The destination of Luigi and Cobal was Mushroom City. Since Cobal had told him that was the center of the Koopa Empire's power in the Mushroom Kingdom, he figured that it would be the first area that needed to be freed. He was going off his experience fighting the Shroops here, since that was the only time he had ever faced off against an army comparable in size to the Koopa Empire. By taking out their key bases, like the horrific Vim factory and the base which was built inside of the massive, monstrous Yub, they had been able to weaken the alien invaders so that by the time they infiltrated Shroob Castle, they weren't up against impossible odds. It wasn't near a solid enough plan for somebody like Luigi, but it would have to work for now. Sometimes, a good, Mario-like charge was all it took to take down a seemingly unbeatable foe. As the two continued their journey, they passed an old airship which was lying tilted to one side, its masts crooked and its wooden hull completely overgrown by moss. There were a couple other chunks of airships lying around, too, evidence of the war, no doubt. Luigi wondered how long it had lay there. How much damage had they managed to deal to the Koopa troop in that final struggle?
Wish that thing was still working,
Cobal commented, glancing at the wreck. There was a tiny white bird perched on one of the rusted bill blasters, created an odd sort of image.
Mushroom City is miles away. It'll take days to reach it on foot. Nope, you're wrong about that,
Luigi corrected him. He had had a clear destination in mind when he had first set out from Toad Town. Namely, the small grove of trees which was about 50 meters in front of them.
Cobal, haven't you ever heard of a warp pipe before? Warp pipe?
Cobal asked, scratching his head.
I've heard people talk about them. supposedly the Koopas clogged them all up when they took over the town. Never understood it, though. It's the way me and my bro used to travel,
Luigi explained, rushing down a hill and picking up the pace till he could reach the grove better.
You can travel across the kingdom, pretty much instantly. So it's magic?
Cobal asked, running up behind Luigi. Luigi shrugged.
Beats me,
he admitted, feeling somewhat embarrassed about it. He was a plumber, so it was sort of his job to understand pipes. A few minutes later, Luigi ran into the grove, crushing the fallen leaves underneath his feet. There it was, a perfectly round, green pipe, strangely free of any sort of wear. He breathed a sigh of relief. He had been a bit worried that the Koopa troop would have done away with this one just like with the ones in Toad Town. With Cobal close behind him, Luigi approached the pipe, putting his hand on the rim and peering into the seemingly endless pit within. A dark, murky smell was coming out of it, quite typical for pipes. Not surprisingly, Cobal looked extremely skeptical.
Is this safe?
he asked, striking his head down the pipe in what was likely an attempt to see what was at the bottom.
I mean, what happens when we hit the bottom? What if we get stuck?
He shot Luigi a suspicious look.
You sure you haven't hit your head on one too many brick blocks, old man? Cobal, you have to trust me,
Luigi said patiently, climbing up onto the pipe and standing on the rim. He understood Cobal's hesitation. He had thought the exact same thing when Mario had first decided to take a dive into one of these things.
I've been down this pipes like this lots and lots of times. And I was a whole lot more nervous than you when I first did it.
With that, Luigi leapt into the air, straight into the gaping black maw of the pipe. The familiar sound rang through his ears as he was plunged into darkness, feeling the suction drag his body forward. Luigi felt goosebumps pop up as his skin as he felt the cold, underground air. He wasn't worried about Cobal chickening out. If the Yoshi didn't have guts, he wouldn't have fought those Koopas in the first place. Time scarcely seemed to pass at all in the cool, damp pipe. In less than 10 minutes, Luigi saw light up ahead. He shot through it like a rocket, leaping out of the pipe before landing stylishly on his feet on some overgrown grass. He glanced around the area, getting the bearing of his surroundings. He was in one of Mushroom City's parks, although it seemed like the park hadn't been maintained at all for the complete duration of the Empire's reign. The bushes had grown thick, shielding it from view, while the trees were at least twice the size since he had last seen them. All in all, the pipe was perfectly hidden, which was probably why the Koopas hadn't done anything about it. About a minute after Luigi exited the pipe, Cobal leapt out, landing a little sloppier than Luigi.
Okay, I'll admit, that was weird,
he said, giving it an odd look as he dusted off his leather jacket.
Yeah. You'll get used to it,
Luigi replied. He peered through the bushes, catching his first glimpse of Mushroom City in the full. At first glance it seemed relatively the same as the city which he and his friends used to go racing through. That was until Luigi noticed the holes and cracks which covered the skyscrapers, scarring them from head to foot. There were some buildings which looked as if they'd had entire floors blasted off, while others had gaped holes in the walls allowing him to stare into the empty apartments.
Whoa!
Luigi gasped, pushing away the bushes as he stepped into the park. The grass came up to his knees, clearly unattended to. Why would Bowser cause so much damage to Mushroom City, when it had no real defenses aside from its police force?
What happened? Fire flower happened,
Cobal replied, stepping out of the bushes himself. He seemed entranced by the wrecked city. Luigi realized that this was his first time in such an urban environment.
Fire flower?
Luigi asked.
It's the resistance against the Koopa Empire,
Cobal explained.
The story goes to say that they banded together after Peach's castle fell. They holed themselves up in Mushroom City and tried to defend it from the Koopa troop. Eventually, they got overwhelmed, but that wasn't enough to keep them down. No, they escaped and are still working to topple the Empire in their own way. Might be the kind of guys we ought to get to know, right, Luigi?
Luigi nodded.
They definitely sound serious.
He agreed as he walked through the overgrown park, heading for the streets. If there was already an active resistance against the Koopa Empire, things might be easier than he thought. The strange thing that occurred to Luigi once he left the park was the city seemed almost completely empty. Gone were the fast-moving cars that had hit him so often in the kart races. The roads were silent. There were scarcely any people on the sidewalk next to them, and the few people that they saw were generally members of the Koopa troop. Luigi kept his head low. Thankfully, these were likely all low-ranked members who would have never fought him before. If they happened to glance his way, they probably wouldn't even recognize him. That was the advantage of being the lesser-known brother. To this day, he was still sure that the Koopas who had fought him only knew him as Green Mario. The street Luigi was on was one he remembered clearly from his travels in the city, one which had been lined with shops and full of happy toads. Now the shops were boarded up or simply abandoned, and the menacing red banners of the Empire hung on the buildings, a constant reminder of the Koopa troop occupation. He really found it quite depressing, that such a lively city had been reduced to a mere shell of its former self courtesy of the enemy occupation. Cobal looked deep in thought as the two of them walked down the sidewalk, passing an occasional Koopa troop member and, even more rarely, a dirty-looking toad. As they passed the toad looked at Luigi with wide eyes. Before turning and going on his way, seemingly dismissing the encounter. Luigi wondered what Cobal was thinking. Was he enraged by the way the Koopa Empire had pillaged and trashed Mushroom City? Was he intimidated by the scope of how much destruction they had caused? Luigi didn't have time to worry about that sort of thing at the moment, though. He had his own worries, as he continued down the sidewalk of the empty street. What was he going to do, exactly? Heading to the Koopa Empire's base in the Mushroom Kingdom had seemed a good enough plan to him, but what was his move after that? Should he do it the classic way? Bust into their main headquarters, and beat up the leader? Or did the Koopa Empire's superior power call for a more cautious approach? There was a massive rumble overhead, like the sound of heavy machinery in an industrial factory. A massive ship was coming into view, casting an enormous shadow over the ground. Luigi stopped what he was doing to watch it pass over. It was clearly an airship, with its huge Bowser figurehead and wooden hull, but it was nearly 10 times larger than the ones he was used to seeing and had traded in its masts for a turret-covered superstructure. Its gigantic engines filled the street with sound as they whipped up a wind that shook the banners that hung from the buildings.
A battleship,
Cobal said in some kind of frightened awe.
I'd heard they were huge, but I had no idea they were that much bigger.
He turned to Luigi.
Man, you better have some kind of plan, right?
Luigi sighed as the sky began to brighten as the battleship slowly passed over them.
How about we start with this Flame guy, right? He's the leader, isn't he?
Yup. Cobal nodded as they continued down the road.
Governor Flame, General of the Koopa Troop and member of Koopa High Command, according to the news channels. Then he's who we have to fight.
Luigi said, feeling nervous even saying that. He was out of practice. Sure, Boom Boom had went down easily enough, but well, he was Boom Boom. If this Governor Flame guy had this much honors, he could be seriously powerful. How would his honed reflex fare against an enemy who was actually in shape?
Easier said than done,
Cobal said glumly.
He's probably surrounded by an entire army. But hey, that's not about to get us down, is it?
He said, with a smirk.
Yet,
Luigi said nervously, sounding not near as confident as his young companion. After about an hour of walking, Luigi and Cobal reached the center of Mushroom City, a gigantic crossroads full of what once were considered the kingdom's hottest and most modern shops, although the majority of those seemed to be out of business now. There were more people in the city center than Luigi had seen otherwise, most of them Koopas, but with a scattering of toads as well. The massive electronic billboards which usually displayed advertisements for the latest new items and blockbuster movies simply showed a static image of the Koopa Empire emblem, looking over the people as they went about their daily business. Luigi noticed that most of the Koopas appeared to be civilians, as they were discussing casual, mundane subjects with each other and didn't seem to be doing any sort of job. Then again, they could simply be soldiers on off-duty, but either way, he didn't think that they'd be a big threat.
Hey, Luigi!
Cobal said, turning to him.
Not trying to slack or anything, but I haven't eaten since we left Toad Town. Think we could grab a bite to eat before figuring out where the governor is?
Luigi's stomach rumbled.
I think that's an excellent idea,
he replied sheepishly. It was easy to forget about food without Mario being around to remind you of it. Flame wasn't going anywhere. Although that didn't mean he could slack. He had to stay on the top of things in case the Koopas were planning to strike back against the people of Toad Town anytime soon. He was going to have to put aside that thought for a bit. If they didn't eat, that would just put both of them at a disadvantage. Now where to eat? All his favorite pizza and pasta places would probably be closed now, wouldn't they? Luigi was just debating whether it was worth it to check if Toady Linguini's pasta house was still open when he was suddenly jerked out of his thoughts by the blaring of loud music which resounded through the entire city center. To Luigi, the music sounded like the combination of a national anthem, the backing track of a pop song, a swinging jazz melody, and just the slightest hint of a carnival song.
What?
He said aloud as the screens with the Koopa Empire flag suddenly switched to showing burning flames.
Who picked this music?
Cobal asked in annoyance.
It sounds like the theme song for some guy who thinks he's the Mushroom Kingdom's top idol or something. Yet?
Luigi nodded. The other people in the city center, both the Toads and the Koopas, also looked confused. There was a flash of bright light on the screens, before the flames parted to reveal a fire bro dressed in a red military coat standing in front of a massive Koopa Empire flag.
Hello Mushroom Kingdom!
The fire bro exclaimed.
It's your favorite lord and master, the one and only Governor Fortuga's Flame.
He snapped his fingers, creating a spark of fire. Both Luigi and Cobal, to the least, were floored.
That's Governor Flame!
Cobal exclaimed, in what sounded like an angry voice.
I dunno. I sort of thought he'd be some super threatening, super evil warrior who'd rule with an iron fist. The kind of guy you can feel good about yourself for bringing down.
Flame struck another, equally flamboyant pose.
Have the Koopa troops' standards gone down?
Luigi wondered as he stared at the screen with morbid fascination.
A guy this ridiculous would never have gotten this high 20 years ago. Sure, the Koopalings were crazy, but they were Bowser's kids. This guy would have had to move up the ranks by himself. Oh, Flame, you are so literally hot!
Sighed a teenaged girl Koopa dreamily.
Snap out of it, Koopri, you can do better than that joker.
An older Koopa who Luigi presumed to be her father sighed with an irritated look on his face.
Today, I'm here with a very special announcement.
Flame exclaimed, flashing a charming smile.
Don't all of you guys just want to be like me? Do heroic deeds day after day for our beloved Koopa Empire? Well, congratulations, now's your chance. Our very own Prince Bowser Jr. has sent out a royal decree which gives everyone a chance to lend me and him a helping hand. He was so kind he actually made it mandatory too, so nobody in Sector 8 will make the mistake of not deciding to sign up.
Forced conscription? That didn't sound good to Luigi at all. Why was the Koopa Empire trying to grow its ranks? It couldn't be because of his freeing Toad Town, could it? Maybe it had something to do with that Fire Flower group.
By my mother's shell!
Capri's father cursed, as his daughter looked at him worriedly.
I thought I had managed to get out of that life. Wait. He said everybody. So does that mean I have to join the army, too?
Capri asked, with concern in her voice. The other Koopa Troopas were talking to each other in similar, worried tones.
This is a very special royal decree.
Flame continued, speaking through the screen.
The Empire's never had anything like it. For the first time in Koopa Troop history, we are opening our doors to species not normally found within our ranks. Yup, you heard that right. Toads, Yoshis, Piantas, Kongs, and everything in between also get the chance to join our ranks.
Instantly, the toads screamed and started to run.
Wait, this doesn't seem right.
A green-shelled Koopa exclaimed in confusion. It seemed even less right to Luigi.
They're going to force toads to enlist in the Koopa Troop,
he thought with wide eyes. No. That was too cruel. Innocent people like the Toad Brigade didn't deserve to be forced to give up their lives in service of the Empire that had destroyed their land. This was.
I hope you enjoy Prince Bowser Jr.'s generous decree. Have fun, everyone.
Flame said with a smile as the screen turned off. Instantly, the streets were swarmed with Koopas, Goombas, Shy Guys, and other members of the Koopa Troop. Had they been lying in wait this whole time? The minions descended upon the people in the town square, both Koopa and Toad, roughly grabbing them.
You'll appreciate this opportunity,
a hammer bro said as he grabbed a crying Capri. A Toad screamed a high-pitched scream as a Mega Goomba knocked him over. Koopa cruisers just like the one Luigi had rode to the Bean Bean Kingdom with were descending from the sky, as the Koopas began to load the conscripts in.
Big L.
Cobal asked nervously.
What should we do?
There was a flock of paratroopas and paragoombas streaking through the air towards them.
Human! Yoshi!
The lead paratroopa exclaimed sharply.
Stand down! As of today, you have been drafted into the Koopa Troop. Not on my watch, Shell Brain!
Cobal shouted fiercely, putting up his fists. Luigi glanced at the terrified toads been dragged into one of the Koopa cruisers, and his heart sank when he realized that he would not be able to save them today. There were simply too many people he'd have to fight.
Cobal, we have to run!
Luigi exclaimed, turning around and dashing down the sidewalk, hoping to the stars that Cobal would follow. To his dismay, he heard a loud smack.
Yeah. That's what you get for trying to get me into your army, you tyrannical reptile.
Luigi turned around to see one of the paratroopas lying on the ground with Cobal standing over him. The others were circling him, like eagles ready to swoop down on their prey.
Cobal!
Luigi cried out, taking a step forward.
We can win this one. We'll save them later. Just you wait 1 second, old man.
Cobal shouted back at him.
I'm going to prove to you that it can be done.
With that, he leaped into the air, kicking a paratroopa in the face with his large boot and delivering a heavy smack to a paragoomba, who was sent flying into the wall of one of the skyscrapers. Cobal angled his fall, obviously intending to squish one of the paratroopas who had been flying slightly lower. Something he would have probably succeeded in, if not for the green-clad Magikoopa who soared in on her broom, casting a spell on the blue Yoshi which immobilized him in the air, his face frozen in an angry snarl.
Always glad to see you, crowd control.
One of the paratroopas said, giving the Magikoopa a salute. Luigi was suddenly filled with rage. Cobal was so young, bright, and full of potential. He could not let the Koopa Empire take all of that potential away from him. Cobal was his pupil, even if they hadn't been together for too long, and no matter how many Koopas there were, he wasn't going to let him get taken away.
All right, it's Luigi time!
He shouted, rushing forward at top speed. The Magikoopa, escorted by the paratroopas and Paragoombas, was already flying away, Cobal's frozen body floating behind him. Luigi knew he could make it. He had always been considered one of the fastest people in the Mushroom Kingdom. His boots glided over the cement, closer, closer. Out of nowhere, somebody stuck out their incredibly long leg. Luigi tripped, smashing his nose against the pavement. Pain shot through him, but Luigi forced himself to rise. He was not going to let these Koopas get away. A hand grabbed him by the overalls and dragged him into one of the skyscrapers, throwing him to the floor. Dazed, Luigi rose to his feet. The place he was in, which made up the bottom floor of the skyscraper, seemed to be an abandoned item shop, its mushrooms dry and scattered about the floor. Brushing the dirt of his nose, Luigi prepared to rush out as fast as he could. There was no way that Magikoopa could be that fast. There was still time to rescue Cobal.
Okay, are you stupid?
Came a thin, nasally voice. At the sound of the all-too-familiar voice, Luigi yelped. There, standing before him in the center of the dimly lit, abandoned item shop, was the man in purple himself. There was no mistaking the spindly body and the pencil-thin mustache. He was face to face with his eternal rival. The one and only Waluigi.